So continuing on with putting back together the Aussie 7, the Australian Austin 7, we've now put together all of the bits of the front suspension. We can focus our attention onto the front brakes. This is the brake assembly that was on the Austin 7. We took it off when we were dismantling the whole thingamajig a few videos ago. And as you can see from when we were taking it apart, they're not very substantial at all, and obviously they're controlled by cable. This is one of the brake pads on the brake shoe of the Aussie 7, and if we measure it, we'll notice that it is 1 inch thick. As time went on with the Austin 7, this setup kind of largely stayed the same, until what I understand from 1936 onwards, the brakes got updated to be a bit more beefy and the brakes got a bit more substantial. This is actually a brand new casting of a 1936 onwards semi-Girling Austin 7 brake drum, but we're measuring this. The whole thing's just under 1.5 inches and the pad being 1.25 inches. So it's grown quite a chunk in size. However, still being the same 7-inch diameter. This is probably not only down to the improvements in automotive kind of development, it's also down to the fact that the Austin 7, like loads of other cars for some silly reason, got heavier and heavier with all of the extra mod cons that kept on getting added. These later 1936 to 1939 cars still had cable powered brakes, but the design was much more refined. It's called a semi-Girling design. Bear in mind, not fully Girling, but this is a semi-Girling brake back plate. So the pads sit here, then there's a lever that sits here and an adjuster that sits here and stuff. These all plonk together to make a much more substantial brake. And also at this point, you'll notice that the back plate for the brake is actually separate to the stub axle. You'll see in the older ones up to 1936 and stuff, the actual brake back plate is the same casting that actually connects to the kingpin that connects to the steering assembly. Well, we've already touched on Cambridge engineering with a few of the other upgrades that we're doing to the Austin 7, which includes the Boudreau independent suspension. Well, today we're going to be looking at the Austin 7 Boudreau hydraulic brake upgrade. The thing is, the 1.25 brake shoe and the 7-inch drum brake radius stayed largely the same with other Austin, Morris and British economy cars right up into the 1950s, the 1960s, even the 1970s, and even back drum brakes to the classic minis, all the way up to the last mini that came out of the factory in the year 2000. In the late 50s, Cambridge Engineering used this thinking to be able to offer modification, to be able to improve the brakes on the Austin 7 to become hydraulic by actually using the 1936 to 1939 semi-Girling brake drums, but then merging them with the internals of 7-inch Morris Minor drum brake parts. There is little point in building something that looks beautiful and goes like hell if you cannot stop it. Do not waste time and money on cables. This is the only way to stop. So start right and make this your primary mod. You can then drive much faster and much safer. This conversion, for the most part, uses Morris Minor components. It's suggested that you obtain a ride in one of these excellent cars to get some idea of what the brakes are really like. You can gauge results even better when you remember that the average Austin 7 is only half the weight of the Morris Minor. The hydraulic conversion kit comprises of 4 steel back plates, complete with wheels, cylinders, shoe brake linings, 1 master cylinder, oh, I got one of these, Morris Minor master cylinder, and all of the necessary piping. The outfit is designed to fit straight onto the 1936 to 1939 Austin 7, which were fitted with detachable backplates and cast iron brake drums. All earlier types of axles will have to be machined. We can do this for you at the cost of 2 shillings plus postage. Please send your 2 front stub axles and the 2 rear half castings. The early type of Austin 7 drum brakes will work quite well, but they won't cover the whole of the brake. They also offer brake pedal modifications, but we'll worry about that and connecting it into the master cylinder later on. And whilst on that advert, there is an address to send these, and 2 shillings, by the way, to get them machined down to be able to work with all of this. Something tells me in 2025 that might not work. So let's figure out what we need to do. The first thing we need to tackle is the stub axles. You can, if you can source the latest stub axles, literally plonk those straight onto the older car. However, I've had absolutely no luck in sourcing the earlier types of stub axles, which is why in the last video I plonked together and sorted out that Colchester lathe that's been sitting over there for a month. Because the later axle is actually inside of here, there's just extra bits of metal around it. What we need to do is machine the outside of the back plate off to be able to fit this onto it. because unfortunately the larger, earlier ones just won't work with the hydraulic parts from the Morris Minor. These are the ones that are in the Austin 7. We're going to keep these so it can revert back to what it needs to revert back to if so. And these ones that were on the Boudreau front suspension, they're a little bit rougher and worse for wear around the outside, so these are perfect candidates. We need to take them off anyway, so we're going to pull the kingpins out using the menagerie of nuts and bolts that I saved from the last video.
Well, absolute sod's law. It turned out the first job that I did in this video turned out to be a bit of a dog. Yeah, so I tried a whole load of bunch of bits and bobs and it just wasn't coming out. I ended up breaking the thread. It was that stuck in. I had to take matters into my own hands and go a little bit off the beaten track. So I whacked out the melty stick of doom and... yeah, I welded a bolt onto it and tried to remove it, and that still didn't work. Tried the grinder. I think I gave up filming in the end. I think I ended up hammering it out the bottom, which is what worked on the other side anyway, as you could see. Smacking it with a threaded rod coming out the bottom and pooh! There we go, they're both out. So now we're going to drill the external bit of the back plate off. There's a bunch of rivets that are around the outside and boom, that pops off. But with this part in the middle, it is still way too large to actually fit inside of these brake drums. So we need to pop it into the lathe. Don't forget to take the chuck key out now. So we're going to do it this side first and basically slowly take the metal off the side of it until it is at the right size. This includes going through all of the holes on the outside, which is where the actual lever for the brakes connect through. So you're removing all of that stuff. It feels a bit weird, but it should look something like this. It's at this point we put the 4-jaw chuck onto the lathe so we can put it around on the other side, and it will take a little moment to make sure it's all in the center. And once it's in the center, we basically take a tiny bit, basically 0.5 millimeter off the front, so we're able to actually fit the brake discs onto it, and it all sits nicely and just right. This felt like the world's most scratchy vinyl player, but it was fun. And then I went over to the milling machine, popped the back plate onto it, and then drilled the holes in the right spot. It's not quite done yet. We need to cut both sides of the circle flat. I mean, I could have used an angle grinder, but we were on the milling machine, so let's do it like that.
So now it looks like this. It's going to fit behind the Girling brakes like so, and it'll be bolt-in-able. We'll also open up the holes for the top to be able to put in plugs. So the top and bottom, now they haven't got anything stopping any moisture getting in or the grease just falling out. So we've got to plop some stuff in there like that. The next thing is we need to work out if it's all going to fit. Funnily enough, sod's law, you wait around for a bust and then 3 suddenly come at once. Yes, 3 sets of semi-Girling stub axles I got offered at this point. So I ended up taking the plunge and getting 1 set. And you'll see actually later in the video that actually getting the latest stub axles is a much better choice. They're much more chunky. Anyway, so if you look closely in this picture at the back plates on the Boudreau hydraulic brake kit, the back plates look neither like this nor like the Morris Minor ones. What's actually happened is they've removed the central part of this one and actually welded it into the middle of this one with an offset, so they're sticking like backs. The issue we're likely going to have is all of the parts that come from the Morris Minor hydraulic brake kit don't actually fit if you bolt the back plate in and then put the actual axle onto the stub. When the axle's squeezed down, there isn't actually enough clearance between this and this to be able to fit all of the gubbins. So what they do instead of doubling the jobs is they actually use this back plate and then weld the middle of the semi-Girling back plate into it, so it's a little bit further back, so it's all got the clearance, this being the Morris Minor back plate. Today I'm going to simply assemble one of the Morris Minor brakes just to know what I'm actually dealing with, because I haven't actually seen one. Okay, so there's a left and right type of cylinder. That's good, that's useful to know. Okay. Ooh, like that. They don't even stay. Okay, interesting. I'm assuming this is going to go actually. Ah. Oh, here we go. Here we go. All right, so that looks better. Morris Minor brake. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. I think that's right. It would be great if we could just use the Morris Minor back plates, but they aren't offset back far enough, so they completely rub. You need these with this kind of offset. Looking at what we need to clear on the hub, it's actually quite tight. It's going to be very tight indeed. So it took a little mo to find a bit of metal that was thick enough. It's about 2.2 mil. All of the stuff I was finding was a little bit on the thinner side than the actual metal. Whilst it might be all right, I just wanted to make it right. So this is the Austin 7 semi-girling one. We're just going to literally mark it out. Simplest way I found to cut the circle was just using a big old hole saw. It's not really right for it, but it's done the job. So this is about approximately the right size for the outside of it. As you can see, very nice indeed. It doesn't need to be the most precise thing in the world, but as long as it's spinning. Oh, that is totally not central. Oh, I got the teeth are on the wrong way. Super important. So 64 mil. So need to pull back what, half of 64 mil from the middle.
This on the lathe because I couldn't think of any other way of doing it, of getting the hole just the right size. So I just did it a bit by bit and then slowly but surely made it a really tight fit around the actual stub axle. As you can see, lovely jubbly. Now we've done that, we're going to take it over to the back plate, make sure it's reasonably the right size. It's a bit oversized so we can grind some of it down. I then made sure I got the holes in the right spot and just drilled the holes out, and it turned out quite well. One of the holes needed a slight adjustment, but apart from that, it fits quite nicely. So we're going to do the same as the last time and basically cut off the sides of it. It will come obvious in a bit, but basically it needs to make space for the actual brake cylinders because it won't fit if it was a whole circle. And yeah, that's fitting nicely, just like that. Thanks a lot, Paul Armstrong, for the semi-girling hubs. Way better than the ones that are machined down. Like the thickness of the machined down ones, and that's like with hardly any taken off to make a flange there. Like it's basically only as thick as this panel, which is the panel that I've made to put on the front of a disc brake. So yeah, much more chunky, these girling boys. And then yeah, didn't want to chop apart the semi-girling pads, so cut a bit of metal, couple of bits of metal, and then that'll weld, not solder, behind the springs. So I found, I don't know whether this is a thing, I should be looking at pictures, but I've just been fuffing around. So the springs for the Morris Minor brakes, instead of going on the back where the Morris Minor ones are, they're on the front. But the problem is now is these kind of like spring upwards. So you need the beehive springs which sit here from the actual back brakes of the Morris Minor. But before we worry about all of those finicky little details, we need to cut the big stonking middle part out of the back plate. So I used a jigsaw with a metal blade and this grinding thingamajiggy, I can't remember what it's called. Well, blooming mind. Why can't I ever remember words? Why can everybody remember words? I just cannot recall the correct words. Anyway, I've gone off on a tangent. Yeah, this is me welding the two sides to be able to offset the central part onto it. For strength, I only grinded the outside welds.
There it is. So that fits onto here.
Now we're going to go for the outside bits. I've got these bendy bits of metal that I made in a vise. I just bent them in the vise, but it worked. So now we've got that. We're going to weld those, tack them in place, make sure it's all sitting nicely, and then go to town with the welder and the grinder. Like I said, I welded it on the inside as well. So the outside looks nice and clean, so there's plenty of space for all of the mechanical malarkey. And then the inside, making sure it's all nice and welded, not soldered. I probably said soldered a fair few times, but it's one hot potato at the minute. But as you can see, it's a relatively clean job. And one of the downsides with cars is the fact that it's got two sides. So usually you've got to make two things exactly the same. So here's me making the second one. I did this a slight different way because there's always room for improvement when you're doing things like this. So this is me welding them up, and yeah, they look pretty much the same. I'm quite pleased with how they came out, if I'm honest. Welded front and back, it looks all right. Anyway, we're going to put the parts onto the back plate now so we can kind of size it all up. So this is me putting it all together so I can do a bit of a test run.
Let it just sit like this for a moment and plump it on. Push it down. In theory, if we pull this off a little bit, offset it a tiny bit. So now we're actually in the center of the drum. You'll see there's a lot of extra metal there. That's good for us. that's fine because we're going to be able to cut it off.
This process took a little while and it took a fair bit of finer tuning and adjustments. There was no point rushing this because if it was rushed, it was just going to be, the whole time was going to be wasted because the brakes wouldn't work. They would be all bumpy and off center and stuff. But yeah, I just kept on making sure at every step that it was still central, still nice and clean. So once I kind of tack welded it in, I removed all the parts and then really went to town, front and back welding. I did little spots at a time so the heat didn't kind of let it all warp and go weird. And yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. They came out quite nicely. So you'll see I've grinded down the offset at the back as well. And this is me spraying with some zinc primer and then a bit of paint on the top. Now we've got to apprehensively pop it all back together and see if it's actually worked. These are the beehive springs from the Morris Minor rear brakes that I was talking about. This isn't actually the final solution I went for. We're going to go for a different solution later in the video. Anyway, this is bolting it together bit by bit and just seeing if it spins nicely.
Before we put it together, we're going to make sure these semi-curling stub axles don't have any cracks in them. So we've got this 3-part crack tester. It's basically like a chemical thing that makes cracks turn up red. So first we've got to spray on some cleaner, give it a good clean. So we spray this stuff called penetrant. It's basically a really thin red kind of dye material. So I'm going to spray a load of it on there. Wipe all of the excess stuff off. Like so. And we'll give it a good old spraying. So there's still bits of red and stuff where I haven't cleaned it off, but there's no like definite lines and stuff where you can see that it is seeped in. So I think there's no cracks in this, so I think we're all right. I think we're good to go. So these were done. It was suggested on the Austin 7 Specials page to use these instead of the beehives. These are the plates for MGB brake discs, so they're a bit easier because they just clip in and out, which is quite handy. So these are holding it down so it stops it from flipping up. And yeah, what we need to do next is actually put bushes into these. I've already removed them. I don't know where that footage went, annoyingly, so it's not the end of the world. But here is a kingpin set with bushes and all of the malarkey. This is definitely the top. Yes, it's definitely the top. Okay. What have I playing at? I've got the press from the other video, haven't I? Which, by the way, I have put boxing gloves on, so it spins this way. It came up in the YouTube comments, and it was a great idea, using boxing gloves. There we go, but the bottom ones are going to be a little bit more tricky. Bit trickier for the bottom ones. I'm going to plop it in place like that, and then put a bolt with a washer going up through. Like so. And then we need another washer and a bolt. I think I could probably do both of them like this next time. If there is a next time. There we go, that's the bottom one in. Ho, ho, ho. Next thing we've got to do is get rid of this protruding bit. There we go. As you can see, doing it with the drill bit like that, it's sort of worked because it hasn't touched any of the metal around the outside. It's only just cut down the brass bit, as you can see. So, yeah. So after we reamed it to make sure it was all a nice and parallel fit between both of the bushes, we pop in the locking bolt into it before we put this on, or you won't be able to get it on. The washer that actually sits on the lower bush was a bit too wide, so I had to do a bit of adjustment. And then we're also going to hammer in the bottom kind of stopper that holds all the grease into the bottom of the hub, and then basically plonk it on. I did this twice because the first time I did it, I didn't ream the bushes enough, but yeah, second time lucky. So this is the second side. Now we're going to plop it on the desk and start assembling it. Oh, this is quite an exciting time indeed. So this is a brand new steering arm because they are prone to cracking apparently, and as you can see, it's a different angle because this is made for lowered suspension. We hammer in the top plug for the grease. In the later ones, it's just a plug. In the earlier ones, it's actually a nice threaded brass item, but you could modify it, I suppose. Now we're going to put the track rod back on and jump over to the piece de resistance, the actual brake back plates. So this is the first time I put it on. You'll notice I put the one on the wrong side because the arrow's pointing at where the brake cylinder should be pointing because it is a leading shoe design. Pop a bit of Loctite on the bolts and then plonk them in, and same on the other side. I'm going to put one of the hubs on. Got nice new shiny modern seals. Look, there's a modern seal in there. We've got a modern sealed bearing. Ooh, I'm gonna push this in. First, let's push it all, sandwich it all in together. The other bearing at the back's all right. You've got this kind of standoff bit of thingamajiggy, and that stands pretty much to the other bearing. The gasket a bit gooey. Plonk it on and we'll fill it with some grease in a bit. Oh, shucks. It is a sealed bearing, but still need to pack it with grease. I haven't got the right grease right now, but I will do that in a bit. You could just do it through that hole, so that's all right. There is a split pin as well, but I'm not going to put that on until we get going. Don't forget that. Remind me about that. Right, let's see how it goes. Oh, yes. Whoops, forgot we need to bolt these little thingamajiggies on, so they're just a little screw around the back. Lovely. Right, now it's going in.
I found that when bolting them down, there was a little bit of binding with the actual back plates. So I took 2mm off the back of the brake disc and it runs lovely and smooth now. Nice and tight. And now we're going to put one of the 17-inch wheels on it. This car originally comes with 19-inch, but we're going smaller, remember, because we're going lowered. It's running nice and free. Obviously, we won't be able to test any of this until we get any of the hydraulic stuff going, but we can make a temporary setup in the next video when we do the back brakes. Yeah, and then we do the same on the other side. Plonk another one of the wheels on. I've only got 2 of these in good condition. I'm still on the hunt for a couple of 17-inch Austin 7 wheels and also the tyres. I'm going to have to buy some new ones. But yeah, if anybody's got any 17-inch Austin 7 wheels sitting in the back anywhere, just let us know. But yeah, as you can see, running nicely. Yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. I'm very pleased, actually. Like, it was a big challenge, this, for me, but I've learnt a lot.
That's good. And then we can wheelbarrow it nice and freely. Oh, yeah. That is great. That is amazing. That's really good. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It may sound a bit slow, but that literally took me a month. Obviously not a whole month. It was a few hours here and a few hours there. There was quite a bit of figuring out and learning to do. If I do it again, it would be a lot quicker. I'd do it slightly differently, but I would end up with a very similar result. Like, they're free, they're working. Well, we haven't tested them yet, but they look like they're going to work. I'm pretty sure the back plates are on the right side. Worst happens is we have to swap them around. But I think as it spins forwards, the pad gets pushed into the rotation of the drum. So I'm pretty sure they're the right way around. The next step in the next video, we're going to pop the back together. That includes putting hydraulic brakes on the back. I was actually thinking of leaving it cable on the back and hydraulic on the front. You can actually operate them both from the same pedal. But the more I think about it, the more I think it will be worthwhile to actually modify these, put semi-girling back plates onto it, and then make it hydraulic. The only reason I'm a little bit hesitant about doing that is I can't find another back axle. Yeah, I need to modify this, but to be honest, better brakes are better brakes, aren't they? Anyway, that'll be in the next video. If you want to see the journey as it happens, then check it out over on Patreon, because I post all of this stuff beforehand. And needless to say, that supports being able to do all of these videos, including these ones, the Look Mum No Computer ones, the museum ones, all of that malarkey. So if you want to support this endeavor, then go and check it out over there. Anyway, I'm Sam. This is one of my slowest projects ever. And yeah, remember,